You know that moment when you realize you're completely, utterly unprepared for the mess you're about to walk into? Yeah, that was me, standing halfway up this massive volcano in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a flimsy rain jacket and a stubborn sense of pride. What made it worse? I was stuck with exactly one other guy on this trek. And trust me, the universe was about to give us a test neither of us saw coming. So, let me rewind a bit. I'd signed up for this volcano trek on a whim during my trip through Central America. The brochures made it look like a peaceful, scenic hike with some breathtaking views at the top. Perfect for taking a break from the usual city chaos and maybe meeting some new people. Except, when I arrived at the trailhead, I realized the group I was supposed to be with had bailed last minute. Turns out, I was the only guy planning to do this hike solo. Or so I thought. Then, out of nowhere, this other guy shows up. Tall, lean, with this easygoing vibe like he'd been living outdoors his whole life. His name was Caleb. We didn't really talk much at first, just exchanged a few nods. But it was clear we were both a bit awkward about being the only two dudes surrounded by a handful of solo female hikers and couples. Naturally, we gravitated toward each other. Probably because misery loves company, right? The hike started off innocently enough. The trail was rocky but manageable, and Caleb had this way of pointing out little details, like a rare bird or some weird moss, that made the whole thing feel less like a chore and more like an adventure. I found myself actually enjoying the company, which was surprising. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, stuck on a volcano, drenched, with only one other guy around. It could have been a nightmare. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something a hell of a lot better. He looked at me and said, "Well, looks like we're stuck here for a while. Might as well make the best of it." I blinked, half drenched and frustrated, and then laughed. A little bitterly. Yeah, no kidding. Could have picked a better day for a hike, huh? Caleb grinned, and it was the kind of grin that made you feel like whatever shitstorm you were in, it was going to be okay. "I'm Caleb, by the way," he said, sticking out a wet hand. I shook it, realizing I hadn't even introduced myself. "Matt." We sat there silently for a minute, listening to the rain hammer down on the rock above us, feeling the droplets sneak in despite the shelter. So Matt, Caleb started, squinting into the gray curtain of rain. "What made you want to do this hike alone?" I shrugged, feeling a little exposed being asked that out of the blue. "Honestly, I guess I was tired of the usual grind. Wanted to do something different, you know. Something that makes you realize how small you are in the grand scheme of things." He nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. "Yeah, I get that. I needed to get away too. Life's been complicated lately." I glanced over, reading some kind of sadness in his eyes that didn't quite match his easy smile. Before I could ask what he meant, he changed the subject. "You ever been stuck somewhere unexpected with a stranger before?" I laughed. "Can't say I have. Usually I avoid strangers." "Well, lucky you," he said with a smirk. "Today you get me." That cracked the ice. We started swapping stories about less than ideal travel moments, awkward encounters, and all the times we thought, "What the hell am I doing?" Somehow, the rain didn't feel as oppressive anymore. After a while, the rain eased up to a drizzle, and the clouds parted just enough for a faint sunset to bleed through. We both stood, stretching stiff legs and deciding it was probably safe to start moving again. Slowly, carefully. The trail was a mess. Mud clung to our boots, and every step had to be deliberate, testing the ground before trusting it. At one point, Caleb reached out a hand to steady me when I slipped on a slick patch. His fingers lingered just a second longer than necessary, sending a weird little jolt up my arm. I looked at him, half expecting him to pull away, but he just smiled like nothing happened. We fell into this quiet rhythm, moving side by side, the awkwardness replaced by this steady, unspoken understanding. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was just being stuck with someone who didn't judge you for being a little lost. When we finally made it back to the main trailhead, the sun was dipping behind the volcano's rim. Our clothes were soaked, shoes caked in mud, and our faces dirty. We both looked like we'd been through a war zone, yet there was something strangely triumphant about it. Caleb turned to me, scratching the back of his neck. "So what now?" I shrugged, smiling. "Honestly, I don't want this to end." He raised an eyebrow. The kind of playful that makes you feel like, maybe, just maybe, this could be more than a one-off weird adventure. We ended up meeting for coffee down by the town's tiny main square. The place was the kind of hole-in-the-wall joint that smelled like strong espresso and something sweet baking in the oven. Caleb was already there when I arrived, looking entirely too put together for a guy who had been drenched to the bone the day before. We talked about everything and nothing. Our trip plans, music tastes, dumb movies, the kinds of stuff you share when you don't have to impress anyone. I kept catching myself staring a little too long, but every time I did, he'd flash that easy smile and wink like he knew exactly what I was thinking. After coffee, Caleb suggested we check out a nearby trail that was supposed to have killer views but was way less intense than the volcano. I was pretty tempted to say no. I was still tired, but something about the idea of spending more time with him won me over. Plus, I figured I owed him for saving me from becoming a mudslide statistic. The trail was quiet, winding through dense jungle with the occasional burst of sunlight sneaking through the leaves. As we walked, Caleb told me about his life back home, a small town on the coast, a messy breakup that still stung, and a job he'd quit just a month ago to backpack around and figure out what he really wanted. It was honest and raw, and I found myself opening up too, about my own messy past and why I'd ended up on this solo trip, trying to escape the routine that was suffocating me. At one point, we stopped by a little waterfall, where the water splashed down into a crystal-clear pool. Caleb kicked off his boots and waded in, his grin contagious. "Come on, Matt. Don't be such a stick in the mud." I laughed and peeled off my shoes, following him into the chilly water. It was freezing, but refreshing, and being there with him felt oddly intimate, even though we were both awkwardly avoiding the obvious undercurrent. After a while, as we sat on a sun-warmed rock, drying off, I noticed Caleb watching me, this quiet intensity in his eyes. My heart jumped, and I felt a stupid grin spread across my face. "Can I be honest?" he asked softly. "Always," I said, a little breathless. He hesitated, then said, "I don't do this. Connect with people, often. Especially not guys." I blinked, surprised. Why not? Guess I've been burned before. I'm not great at trusting or letting someone in. But with you, it feels different, like I'm not pretending. The way he said it made the whole world narrow down to just the two of us. I reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead, and he didn't pull away. "Me too," I whispered, heart pounding. "I've been scared of all this. But with you, I don't want to be." He smiled then, that slow, genuine smile that makes you believe in something better. And in that moment, standing there with wet feet and 1,000 fears, it felt like maybe we were both ready to step into something neither of us had expected. The rest of the day blurred into a mix of laughter, stolen glances, and the kind of easy conversations that don't feel forced. When evening rolled in, we found a little roadside stand selling grilled corn and fresh fruit juices. We sat together on a bench, sharing food and stories under a sky now scattered with stars. It wasn't some perfect romantic movie moment. We were messy, awkward, still figuring things out. But it was real. And that, more than anything, felt like a start. As we finally said goodnight, Caleb gave me this look that was half teasing, half serious. "So, Volcano survivor, think you're up for another adventure tomorrow?" I laughed, feeling that same spark of possibility. "Only if you promise no rain this time." He grinned, and I knew whatever came next, I wasn't facing it alone. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't expected: nervous excitement. It was weird, really. Here I was, hundreds of miles from home, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to seeing someone. Caleb. We'd planned to meet early to explore a small village a couple of hours away, a place known for its handicrafts and vibrant market. The idea was simple: walk around, grab some local food, maybe find a spot to watch the sunset. Nothing too complicated, but enough to keep this momentum going. When I showed up at the hostel's lobby, Caleb was already there, casually leaning against the wall, scrolling on his phone like he wasn't about to start our little adventure. His hair was still damp from the morning humidity, and his eyes lit up when he saw me. "Morning, volcano survivor," he teased, nudging me with his shoulder. I smiled, feeling my usual awkwardness melt away a little in his presence. "Morning, rain dodger." We set off, sharing a beat-up old taxi that smelled like exhaust and adventure. The ride itself was full of those small moments. The way his hand briefly touched mine when he shifted in his seat, how our laughs bounced between the cracked windows as the driver cursed the traffic. When we arrived, the village was alive with colors and sounds. Stalls lined the narrow streets, bursting with woven fabrics, wooden carvings, and spices that made my nose twitch. Caleb and I wandered with no particular plan, just following the rhythm of the place. At one point, we stopped by a stall selling handmade bracelets. Caleb picked up a simple leather one, holding it between his fingers. I caught him looking at me, this quiet smile playing on his lips. "You want one?" I asked, surprising myself with how casual it sounded. He shrugged, a bit shy. "Maybe." "Yeah," I said, picking out a thin braided one with a little silver charm shaped like a leaf. We traded small gifts, slipping the bracelets onto each other's wrists, with a touch that felt more electric than it should have been. Caleb's eyes lingered on mine for just a second longer, and I felt my heart stutter. Later, we found a small cafe shaded by a giant mango tree. We sat with cold drinks, watching the world go by. It was easy to talk to him, easier than I'd expected. We joked about our mutual clumsiness on the volcano trails, debated the best way to grow corn, and shared stories about our families. There was something comforting in the way he listened, like he actually wanted to know the things I kept tucked away. As afternoon turned to evening, we decided to hike a short trail up a nearby hill to catch the sunset. The climb was gentle, the path lined with wildflowers and the scent of earth after rain. Caleb walked close beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, and I barely dared to breathe. At the top, the sky exploded in colors, deep oranges, pinks, and purples melting into the horizon. We sat side by side on a flat rock, the silence between us full but not uncomfortable. Finally, Caleb spoke. "Thanks for sticking around yesterday." I wasn't sure if I wanted to, or even could. I looked at him, heart pounding. Me too. I wasn't expecting any of this. He reached out, taking my hand in his. It was warm, steady, and somehow exactly what I needed. Maybe that rainstorm was a blessing in disguise. I squeezed his hand, feeling something shift inside me. Yeah, maybe it was. The sun dipped below the horizon, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The doubts, the fears, the messy pasts. Just Caleb, me, and the quiet promise of whatever this was becoming. On the way back down, our conversation turned lighter, but that touch lingered, a silent confirmation that we weren't just two guys caught in bad weather anymore. We were something else. Something real. When we got back to town, the streets were lit with lanterns, and music drifted from open windows. Caleb suggested grabbing a late dinner at a tiny place he'd noticed earlier, famous for its fresh ceviche. The meal was simple but perfect, and as we ate, I realized I hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in a long time. There was a rhythm to us now, silent and spoken, that made the world seem less daunting. After dinner, we wandered back toward the hostel, the night air cool and fragrant. Without really thinking, I slid my hand into his again, and he smiled at me like I'd just made the best decision of the trip. Standing outside the hostel, I hesitated, trying to find the words that didn't sound too desperate or over the top. Caleb must have read the look on my face because he leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "Whatever this is," he murmured, "I'm glad it's with you." I closed my eyes, heart racing, and whispered, "Me too." And then, under a sky full of stars, with the weight of everything else lifted for just a little while, we kissed. Not some perfect movie moment, but a messy, real kiss. The kind that leaves you breathless and hopeful all at once. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or where this would go, but in that moment, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After that night, things between Caleb and me felt like they were shifting into a new gear. Subtle, but unmistakable. We were no longer just two guys who got caught in a rainstorm on a volcano. We were something different, though neither of us rushed to put a label on it. That felt right. Easy, natural, no pressure, just connection. The next few days were a blur of shared breakfasts, lazy afternoons exploring the dusty streets of the little town, and quiet evenings where we'd sit on the hostel's creaky wooden porch, watching the stars come out and talking about everything and nothing. I found myself opening up more than I had in years, telling him things I hadn't even told my closest friends back home. One afternoon, we decided to take a boat tour along the nearby lake. The sun was warm, the water calm. Caleb was sitting next to me, his arm casually draped over the back of the bench, fingers brushing mine every now and then. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, but every time our skin touched, I felt this little spark, like electricity running just beneath the surface. At one point, he turned to me with that half grin he always had when he was about to say something a bit cheeky. "You're not mad I'm a terrible navigator, are you?" I laughed. "You're terrible but charming. I can live with it." He smiled, then grew a little quieter. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something. Back home, I wasn't just running from a messy breakup. I was running from myself, from everything I thought I was supposed to be." I nodded, encouraging him to go on. "I'm still figuring it out, but being here, with you, makes me believe I can be someone different, someone better." Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. There was this vulnerability in his voice, a raw honesty I wasn't used to seeing in anyone, let alone myself. I took his hand in mine and squeezed it tight. "I'm glad you told me," I said softly, "because I feel the same way." As the boat drifted on the lake, the sun dipping lower, the world felt impossibly wide and full of promise. For once, I wasn't scared of what might come next. I was ready to see where this road went, even if I had no idea where that was. But then, of course, life threw a curveball. On our last full day in town, Caleb got a call. He stepped away from the table where we were having lunch, and I caught the way his smile faltered, how his usual easygoing demeanor shifted just a touch. When he came back, he sat down quietly. "My dad's sick," he said, voice low. "I need to go back home, sooner than I thought." I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it better, but all I could do was reach across the table and take his hand again. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning." I didn't want to tell you until I knew for sure. We spent the rest of the afternoon in a kind of stunned silence. The weight of it was heavy. This sudden, sharp reminder that nothing here was permanent, that even the best moments can be fragile. That night, we walked down to the lake again, the moon casting silver light across the water. Caleb was quiet, and I could tell he was wrestling with 1,000 thoughts. I stopped and looked at him. "Hey, whatever happens, I'm glad we met. And I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with you leaving, but I'm here. For you." He smiled, a real smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That means a lot, Matt. More than you know." We sat there for a long time, just holding on to each other, neither of us ready to say goodbye. The next day, we packed up our things. The goodbye was awkward and sweet. Long hugs, promises to stay in touch, and that crushing feeling of knowing things were changing whether we liked it or not. When Caleb got on the bus to the airport, I waved until he was out of sight, feeling this strange mix of hope and heartbreak. I spent the next few days wandering the town, trying to make sense of everything. I texted him a lot, and he responded when he could, but I could tell he was distracted. Still, even with the distance between us, I felt something shift inside me. That volcano rainstorm, the hikes, the sunsets, they weren't just memories. They were the beginning of something I wanted to hold on to, no matter where life took us. I don't know what's next for Caleb and me. Maybe this is just a beautiful chapter in a story neither of us saw coming. Or maybe it's the start of something bigger. All I know is that sometimes the best things happen when you're stuck in the rain with a stranger on a volcano, and you realize maybe, just maybe, you're not alone after all. The days after Caleb left felt like I was stuck in limbo. The town didn't seem quite as vibrant without him. The colors a little duller, the noise a bit more distant. I kept expecting to get a message from him, a random text to break the silence. But the replies were sporadic, weighed down by whatever was happening back home. It was hard not to read between the lines, to feel the distance growing between us despite the words we shared. One evening, about a week after he'd gone, I found myself back at the little cafe under the mango tree, the same spot where we'd shared cold drinks and 1,000 small moments. I sat there with my phone in my hand, staring at the screen, debating whether or not to send a message. Finally, I typed something simple. "Hey, missing our volcano survivor and rain dodger chats. Hope you're holding up." To my surprise, his reply came quickly. "Miss you too. It's been hard, but hearing from you helps." That little exchange sparked something, a thread of connection we both seemed desperate to hold on to. Our texts grew longer, more frequent, and eventually we started scheduling video calls. Seeing him on the screen felt like a breath of fresh air. His smile was still the same, a little softer now, but there. Those moments made the distance shrink, even if just for a little while. During one of our calls, Caleb confessed, "It's been tough with my dad. Hospitals, waiting, all the uncertainty. I wasn't sure I could do this trip at all, but then I met you, and it all felt different." I told him, "I'm here. You don't have to do it alone." We talked late into the night, sharing our fears and hopes, the kind of honest conversations that make you feel seen, even through a screen. It wasn't the same as being side by side on a trail or watching sunsets together, but it was something. Then came the surprise. A week later, Caleb messaged me out of the blue. "Got some good news. Dad's stable for now. I'm thinking of coming back. Want to see if we can pick up where we left off." My heart jumped and I didn't even hesitate. Yes, I want that. He arrived a few days later, stepping off the bus with that familiar easy grin, damp hair that smelled like rain, and eyes that still held the same spark. We hugged like we hadn't let go, and suddenly, all the distance felt like it had never been. We spent the first night catching up over cheap beers, laughter spilling over the table, the kind of joy that comes from realizing you've been given a second chance. The next day, Caleb suggested we try a different hike, something less intense, but with a view that supposedly rivaled the volcano. We packed light and set off under a bright, cloudless sky. Halfway up the trail, we stopped to rest on a fallen log, the valley sprawling below us like a painted dream. Caleb looked over at me, his expression serious for once. "Matt, I've been thinking about us, about what this means. I don't want to rush, but I also don't want to waste time pretending this is just a fling." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle deep in my chest. "I feel the same. I want to see where this goes. No games, no running." He smiled, relief flooding his face. "Good. Because I'm done running." We sat there for a while, hands intertwined, sharing that quiet moment among the trees. It wasn't perfect. We both still had our scars and insecurities, but it was real. As we made our way back down, the sun dipping low, Caleb slipped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned into him without a second thought. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When night fell, we stayed out late, talking about dreams and plans, the future suddenly feeling possible instead of scary. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the rainstorm on the volcano wasn't just a crazy adventure. It was the start of something that had pulled me out of a rut and into a story I never expected to be a part of. And with Caleb by my side, I was ready for whatever came next, even if the forecast said there might be more rain. Weeks passed, and with Caleb back, the town felt alive again, the way it should. We settled into a rhythm that was easy and comforting, like finding the perfect groove in a song you didn't know you were missing. No grand gestures, no rushed promises, just two guys figuring life out one quiet moment at a time. One evening, we found ourselves back on that same porch where the stars had first witnessed our tentative kiss. The air was warm, carrying the scent of jasmine and damp earth from a light rain earlier. Caleb pulled his jacket tighter around him, and I moved closer. "Funny," he said softly, "how a storm trapping us on a volcano led to all this." I smiled, heart full. Yeah, I never thought getting stuck in the rain could turn into something real. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "Me neither. but I'm glad it did. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need filling. Eventually, I broke the quiet. I was scared before, of being vulnerable, of getting close. But with you, it feels safe. Caleb looked at me, his eyes steady and warm. That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me. We leaned into each other, the world outside fading away, leaving just us. No grand declarations or dramatic confessions, just two people who had found something worth holding on to. In that moment, I realized that love isn't always fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes, it's two people caught in an unexpected storm, choosing to stay, to lean in, and to believe in something better together. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it too.